What began as Nathan Foster's instinctive dive into raging floodwaters to save a drowning child would uncover a national security situation that 3 intelligence agencies had worked tirelessly to contain from public knowledge. The devastating spring flood that had threatened one young life now provided the perfect backdrop for a presidential intervention, unlike anything the rural community of Riverdale County had ever experienced. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Nathan stood at his kitchen window, steaming coffee forgotten, in his weathered hands as he counted the 5th black SUV rolling through his gates. The modest homestead that his grandmother had built from the unforgiving Ohio Valley soil now resembled a secured government facility rather than the struggling organic farm it had been just a week earlier. "I don't understand any of this, Rusty," he said to the aging golden retriever pressing anxiously against his leg. The dog whined softly, reflecting his owner's growing unease as men and women in dark suits established a perimeter around the old barn where his farming equipment was stored. Secret Service agents, because that's unmistakably what they were, positioned themselves at strategic points around his property, speaking quietly into their wrist microphones while scanning the surrounding countryside. The historic spring, floods that meteorologists had dubbed the Great Midwest Deluge, had brought record rainfall and deadly flash floods to Riverdale County, washing out bridges and overwhelming emergency services. Local authorities had issued evacuation orders for low-lying areas, closing roads and advising residents to move to higher ground immediately. Nathan had spent the previous week reinforcing the natural levees that protected his fields, working around the clock to divert water from his organic crops that represented his family's entire livelihood. It was during his check of the river's edge, where a tributary often overflowed during heavy rains, that he'd spotted the vehicle. At first, Nathan had thought it was debris, perhaps a shed or small boat caught in the current. Only when Rusty began barking frantically and running along the riverbank did Nathan realize there was a luxury SUV half submerged in the churning waters, slowly being pulled toward the main river channel where survival would be impossible. Getting to the vehicle had been a grueling ordeal. The floodwaters were swift and dangerously cold, filled with debris that could knock a man unconscious or pull him under without warning. Nathan had managed to reach the SUV just as water began pouring through the partially open driver's window. Inside, he discovered not an adult but a terrified 10-year-old girl, trapped in the back seat, with water rising rapidly around her. "It's okay, I'm here to help," he'd said with as much calm as he could muster, forcing the door open against the water's pressure. The child was shivering uncontrollably, her eyes wide with fear. "Can you swim?" he asked. When she shook her head no, Nathan knew he faced an even greater challenge than he'd anticipated. With the vehicle groaning as the current pulled at it, Nathan made a split-second decision. He unfastened his belt, wrapped it around the girl's waist, and secured the other end to his own. "Hold onto my neck tight as you can," he instructed, helping her out of the vehicle and onto his back. The return journey to shore had been even more treacherous, the added weight making each step a battle against the powerful current. It wasn't the flood's ferocity that had triggered this governmental response. It was the identity of the child. Nathan had pulled from the sinking vehicle just beyond the eastern edge of his property. As Nathan had wrapped the girl in emergency blankets from his truck and cranked the heater to maximum, seeking to raise her core temperature, he discovered several items that had initially confused him but now seemed ominously significant given the government's reaction. Nathan's fingers unconsciously traced the outline of the small pendant he'd found clutched in the girl's hand. A miniature replica of the presidential seal that she had refused to let go of, even in her half-conscious state. The same pendant that had caused the first government official to visibly pale when Nathan mentioned it during his 911 call to emergency services. The girl's possessions had been minimal: expensive clothes soaked through, a waterlogged backpack containing a tablet in a waterproof case, and most significantly, a small red phone unlike any Nathan had ever seen, with no visible buttons or screen, just a smooth surface marked with what appeared to be a fingerprint scanner. During those desperate hours, working to keep the girl warm and calm, while waiting for emergency services to navigate the flooded roads, Nathan had noticed other peculiarities. Despite being cold and frightened, the child maintained a composure that seemed beyond her years. She asked precise questions about their location and the time, but offered no information about herself or how she had ended up alone in a vehicle during a flood evacuation. Most strikingly, when Nathan had finally asked her name, she had hesitated before responding with careful precision. "My name is Emma. That's all I can tell you right now, but my father will want to thank you personally." Now that simple rescue had escalated into something far beyond Nathan's comprehension. The procession of government vehicles included specialized communications equipment being established on his property, and the personnel securing the perimeter wore the unmistakable earpieces and lapel pins of Secret Service agents. Several were unloading equipment that looked more appropriate for a presidential visit than a follow-up to a child rescue: portable barricades, scanning devices, and what appeared to be a temporary security checkpoint being established at his farm entrance. The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder overhead, adding to the surreal transformation of his isolated family farm. A sleek, black helicopter bearing official markings settled onto his east pasture, the downdraft creating swirling patterns in the muddy puddles left by the receding floodwaters. From the aircraft emerged a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit, his bearing unmistakably authoritative despite his casual stride. He was flanked by two agents whose expressions betrayed nothing as their eyes continuously scanned the surroundings. The precision of their movements and the quality of their tactical gear suggested elite protection details rather than standard security personnel. As they approached the farmhouse, Nathan stepped onto the porch, determined to get answers about why his act of basic human decency had apparently triggered a visit from what appeared to be the highest levels of government. Rusty remained at his side, his normally friendly demeanor replaced with wary vigilance. "Mr. Foster," the man called as he reached the steps. "I'm Marcus Sullivan, White House Chief of Staff. Thank you for meeting me outside. It simplifies certain protocols." Nathan nodded cautiously, noting how the agents positioned themselves to maintain clear sightlines across his property. "Doesn't seem like I had much choice, Mr. Sullivan. Your people have surrounded my home." "A precautionary measure, I assure you," Sullivan replied with practiced diplomacy. "The situation requires certain security parameters that may seem excessive, but are entirely warranted given the circumstances." "And what situation would that be?" Nathan asked, his patience wearing thin. "I found a child in danger and brought her to safety instead of letting her drown. Since when does basic human decency warrant what looks like preparations for a presidential visit?" Something flickered across Sullivan's face, a momentary break in his professional mask that might have been respect or perhaps concern. "Mr. Foster, the child you rescued was not just any girl caught in unfortunate circumstances. For your safety and national security, I need you to brief me on everything that occurred from the moment you found her until emergency services arrived." "Not just any girl," Nathan repeated, confusion mounting. "She told me her name was Emma, that she was 10 years old. She was trapped in a luxury SUV that had somehow been caught in the flood. She was suffering from mild hypothermia and shock. I brought her to my truck because it was closest, got her warmed up and called 911 when I finally got cell service." Sullivan studied him carefully. "Did she speak to you at any point? Share any information about herself or how she came to be in that vehicle alone?" Nathan hesitated, recalling the strange calm the child had displayed once her immediate fear had subsided. She was unusually composed for a kid who'd nearly drowned. Asked about our location, the time, whether anyone else knew she was here. Wouldn't tell me her last name or who her parents were. He paused, remembering another detail. There was one other thing. While we were waiting for the ambulance, she fell asleep briefly. When she woke up, she seemed disoriented for a moment. Grabbed my arm and said, "Tell them Osprey is compromised. Tell only my father." Then she seemed to catch herself and didn't say anything else important. Sullivan's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "And the items you mentioned to emergency services, the pendant and the red phone, did you handle them directly? Did the phone activate in any way?" A chill that had nothing to do with the spring air crept up Nathan's spine. The pendant never left her hand until the paramedics arrived. The phone. She kept it in her pocket until just before the ambulance came. Then she took it out and pressed her thumb to it. It must have had some kind of fingerprint security. She seemed relieved when nothing happened. "What exactly is going on here, Mr. Sullivan? Who was that girl?" Instead of answering directly, Sullivan handed him an official document, a temporary non-disclosure agreement with severe penalties prominently displayed in the opening paragraph. "Before we proceed further, I need your signature acknowledging that everything from this point forward is classified at the highest level." Nathan stared at the document, the surreal quality of the morning intensifying. The simple act of helping a child in danger had somehow entangled him in something far beyond his understanding, something significant enough to bring White House officials streaming to his isolated property within a week of his call to emergency services. As birds began to return to the fields around his farm, singing despite the mud and debris left by the receding waters, Nathan made a decision that would forever alter his understanding of the world and his place in it. He took the offered pen and signed, committing himself to whatever extraordinary revelation waited on the other side of his signature. "Now," he said, handing back the signed document, "tell me who I really rescued from that flood." Sullivan gestured toward Nathan's front door. "We should continue this conversation inside, Mr. Foster. Some matters are better discussed away from open spaces and potential listening devices." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Listening devices on my farm? We're miles from the nearest neighbor. Distance is no longer the barrier to surveillance it once was," Sullivan replied cryptically, his eyes scanning the tree line beyond Nathan's property. "And given what I'm about to share with you, privacy is essential." Inside the farmhouse, kitchen Nathan's home felt suddenly unfamiliar with Sullivan's presence. The worn wooden table, where 3 generations of Fosters had taken their meals, now served as an impromptu security briefing station as Sullivan removed a slim tablet from his jacket. "What I'm authorized to tell you is limited," he began, activating the device with his thumbprint. "But given your direct contact with the subject and the items, you're entitled to certain information for your own safety." The tablet projected a holographic display above the kitchen table, technology far beyond anything Nathan had seen outside of science fiction movies. The image showed what appeared to be an organizational chart with numerous redacted sections and security classifications he didn't recognize. 7 days ago, there was a security breach at a classified location, Sullivan explained, manipulating the display to zoom in on a heavily redacted document. "The information potentially compromised is deemed critical to national security, specifically relating to our nuclear defense protocols and emergency contingency plans." Nathan stared at the pulsing classification markers on the document, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "I don't understand what that has to do with a 10-year-old girl in a flood. The girl you rescued, Emma, is not just any child. Sullivan said, his voice lowering slightly. "She is Emma Harrington, the daughter of President Harrington." The revelation hit Nathan like a physical blow. He had rescued the president's daughter, a fact that had been completely absent from any news coverage of the floods or rescue efforts. But why was she alone in a vehicle during a flood evacuation? Where was her security detail? Nathan asked, struggling to process this information. Sullivan adjusted the display again, revealing a timeline of events leading up to the flood. Emma was being transported from her school to a secure location following a credible threat against the first family. The route was classified, the vehicle unmarked, and the Secret Service detail consisted of just 2 agents to maintain a low profile. He swiped to the next screen, showing satellite imagery of the flooding event. What wasn't anticipated was both the severity of the flash flooding and the fact that the threat against the first family was merely a diversion. Nathan's mind raced to connect the pieces. "You're saying someone deliberately created a security threat to force a transportation of the president's daughter along a specific route, knowing there would be flooding. We believe the flooding itself was the X factor they couldn't have precisely predicted, but they exploited the weather emergency and resulting chaos," Sullivan confirmed. "Approximately 20 minutes before you found Emma, the transport vehicle was forced off the road by what appeared to be another vehicle caught in the flood. The 2 Secret Service agents exited to assist what they believed were civilian motorists in distress." Sullivan's expression darkened. Both agents were eliminated with extreme precision. The vehicle with Emma inside was then deliberately directed toward the flooding tributary where you found it. "A kidnapping attempt," Nathan said, the horrific scenario becoming clear. "But who would—" "That remains classified," Sullivan interrupted. "What I can tell you is that the incident represents one of the most sophisticated attempts to compromise national security through leverage against the first family that we've encountered." The implications were staggering. Nathan had not simply rescued a child from an unfortunate accident. He had unwittingly intervened in what appeared to be a state-level operation to kidnap the president's daughter, likely for the purpose of gaining leverage over the most powerful person in the world. "The pendant she was holding?" Nathan asked. "And that red phone?" "The pendant contains a subdermal tracking device designed to be activated only in extreme emergencies," Sullivan explained. "It's paired with the secure communication device. You described what we call a red phone. Together they form part of the president's family security protocol." He manipulated the holographic display again, bringing up a schematic of a device similar to what Nathan had seen in Emma's possession. "What's critical to understand is that the phone is designed to connect directly to the president through a secured, quantum-encrypted channel that bypasses all standard communication infrastructure. It cannot be intercepted, traced, or compromised by conventional means." Nathan processed this information, pieces falling into place. "So when she checked the phone and nothing happened, she was verifying that it hadn't been activated," Sullivan confirmed. "If it had been, it would have created a direct communication link and revealed her location not just to us, but potentially to whoever was behind the attempt if they had managed to compromise the device." "And Osprey is compromised?" Nathan asked. "What does that mean?" Sullivan's expression remained neutral, but a new tension entered his posture. "That's a code phrase indicating that a specific security protocol has been breached. The fact that Emma knew to use it suggests she overheard or observed something critical during the incident." He leaned forward slightly. "Which brings us to why I'm here today, Mr. Foster. The President of the United States wishes to express his profound gratitude for your actions in person." Nathan felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. "The President is coming here, to my farm?" He's already en route, Sullivan confirmed, checking his watch. The helicopter you observed was the advance team. Marine One will be arriving within the hour. The reality of the situation began to sink in. Nathan's simple act of courage, during a natural disaster, had inserted him into matters of national security at the highest level. His modest farm was about to host the President of the United States, not for a campaign photo opportunity or policy announcement, but for a private expression of gratitude from a father whose child he had saved. "This seems excessive," Nathan said finally. "I appreciate the gesture, but surely the President has more important matters to attend to than personally thanking someone for doing what any decent person would do." Sullivan studied Nathan for a moment, then spoke with unexpected candor. "Mr. Foster, what you need to understand is that this visit serves multiple purposes. Yes, the President genuinely wishes to thank you for saving his daughter's life, but he also needs to debrief you personally regarding what Emma might have said." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "There are aspects of this situation that suggest the security breach extends into our most secure protocols. The President has determined that the only way to ensure operational security is to handle certain aspects of this investigation personally, outside the standard chain of command." The implications of this statement hung in the air between them. The President didn't fully trust his own security apparatus and was creating a parallel investigation starting with Nathan, a witness outside the system who had no connections to Washington power structures. "I'm a simple farmer," Nathan said, the enormity of the situation settling over him. "How am I supposed to help with matters of national security?" "Sometimes, Mr. Foster, the most valuable perspective comes from outside the established systems," Sullivan replied. "You have no preconceptions, no political allegiances to cloud your recollection, and most importantly, Emma trusts you. She specifically asked to speak with you again." Before Nathan could respond, his phone rang. The farm's landline that he kept primarily for emergencies. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize with a Washington, D.C. area code. "You should answer that," Sullivan said with the faintest hint of a smile. "I believe it's the First Lady. She's been quite insistent about speaking with you before the President arrives." Nathan looked from Sullivan to the ringing phone, then back again, the surreal nature of the moment striking him anew. With a deep breath, he reached for the receiver, stepping into a world of international intrigue and high-level politics that had previously existed for him only in thriller novels and news headlines. "Hello, this is Nathan Foster," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Mr. Foster," came a warm, cultured voice that he instantly recognized from countless news broadcasts and public appearances. "This is Elizabeth Harrington. I understand. My husband's staff has overrun your lovely farm, and I wanted to apologize for the intrusion before he arrives and turns your life completely upside down." There was a genuine warmth in her tone that caught Nathan off guard, not the practiced charm of a political figure, but the sincere gratitude of a mother. "No apology necessary, Mrs. Harrington," he replied, struggling to find the right words for such an unexpected conversation. "How is Emma doing?" "She's recovering well, thanks to you," the First Lady said, her voice catching slightly. "The doctors say if she had been in that water, even 10 minutes longer." She paused, composing herself. "Mr. Foster, there aren't words adequate to express what we owe you, but I'll start with thank you. You saved our daughter's life at considerable risk to your own." "Anyone would have done the same," Nathan said automatically. The standard response he'd given to local reporters who had covered the rescue as a human interest story, completely unaware of the actual identity of the child involved. "That's where you're wrong," Elizabeth Harrington replied with quiet conviction. "Most people would have called for help and waited. You didn't hesitate to put yourself in danger." Emma told us everything, how strong the current was, how you tied her to you with your own belt, how you carried her through water that could have swept you both away. Nathan remained silent, unsure how to respond to such direct gratitude from the First Lady of the United States. "I also want to prepare you," she continued after a moment. "My husband is not himself right now. What happened to Emma has affected him deeply, both as a father and as president. The security implications have him questioning people he's trusted for years." This candid admission surprised Nathan. Such vulnerability from one of the most protected and politically careful families in the world seemed out of character with the public image they maintained. "I understand," he said, though in truth he couldn't possibly comprehend the pressure of being responsible for both a nation and a family under threat. "The reason I'm calling personally is to ask for your patience and discretion." The First Lady continued, "James, the President, believes Emma may have told you something significant, something she hasn't shared with our security teams. She's asked repeatedly to speak with you again." Nathan's mind returned to the strange message Emma had entrusted to him during her brief moment of disorientation. "She did say something about Osprey being compromised," Mr. Sullivan explained. "It was a security code." There was a pause on the line, longer than would be normal in casual conversation. When the First Lady spoke again, her voice had taken on a more measured quality. "Mr. Foster, when my husband arrives, please share everything Emma said to you, exactly as she said it. Even details that might seem insignificant could be crucial right now." The conversation concluded with the First Lady thanking him once more and informing him that the President would arrive within 30 minutes. As Nathan hung up the phone, he turned to find Sullivan watching him with an unreadable expression. "The First Lady is well known for her ability to establish rapport," Sullivan observed neutrally. "Is that what that was?" Nathan asked, still processing the surreal conversation. "It seemed more like she was warning me about something." Sullivan neither confirmed nor denied this interpretation. Instead, he checked his watch and touched his earpiece briefly, listening to some communication Nathan couldn't hear. "The President's helicopter will be landing in approximately 25 minutes, he announced. "I suggest you prepare anything you need to before your private meeting." "Private meeting?" Nathan echoed. "I assumed you would be present for any discussion." A tight smile crossed Sullivan's face. "Under normal circumstances, yes. But the President has specifically requested to speak with you alone after an initial introduction with staff present." He paused, studying Nathan with calculated assessment. "That's unusual, Mr. Foster. President Harrington rarely conducts meetings without senior staff, particularly on matters of national security." The implication hung in the air between them. The President didn't fully trust his own Chief of Staff with whatever would be discussed. This realization added another layer of tension to the already extraordinary situation. Outside, the activity around the farm had intensified. Additional security personnel had established a broader perimeter. Communications equipment was being fine-tuned, and what appeared to be an advanced electronic countermeasure system was being deployed around the property, dome-shaped devices, positioned at intervals that presumably created some kind of security bubble. Nathan took advantage of the brief time before the President's arrival to change into clean clothes and quickly straighten his modest home. The absurdity of preparing his farmhouse for a presidential visit struck him suddenly. The leader of the free world would soon be sitting at his grandmother's kitchen table, the same place where Nathan normally sorted seed catalogs and calculated crop yields. As he moved through his home, Nathan noticed that Sullivan's team had been busy as well, Subtle security devices had been placed at key points, tiny cameras in corners, signal boosters near windows, and what looked like specialized sensors near doors and air vents. His private farm had been transformed into a secure facility in less than an hour. At the 20-minute mark, Rusty's ears perked up several seconds before Nathan heard it, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approaching, different from the advance team's arrival. This was heavier, more purposeful, the unmistakable sound of Marine One carrying the President of the United States to a humble organic farm in rural Ohio. Nathan stepped onto his porch, Rusty at his side, to witness a sight few private citizens ever see up close. The massive green and white helicopter bearing the presidential seal descended onto his east pasture with practiced precision, its rotors stirring the puddles left by the receding floodwaters into swirling patterns. The insignia of the United States gleamed in the afternoon sun as the aircraft settled onto the makeshift landing zone the advance team had prepared. Sullivan appeared at Nathan's side, his posture now formally attentive. "Remember, Mr. Foster, the standard protocol is to address him as Mr. President throughout your conversation. He may invite you to use his name, but wait for that invitation." Nathan nodded, suddenly acutely aware of his calloused hands and the permanent tan line where his work gloves usually ended. He was about to meet the most powerful person in the world, not as a citizen selected for a photo opportunity, but as the man who had saved that person's child from certain death. The helicopter's door opened and security personnel deployed, with practiced efficiency, establishing a protective formation before the president emerged. When he did, Nathan was struck by how different James Harrington appeared in person compared to his television appearances. The man who stepped onto Nathan's farm carried himself with the expected authority, but there was something more, a tightly controlled tension that suggested he was operating under tremendous strain. The president paused briefly at the bottom of the helicopter steps, surveying the farm with a thoughtful expression before his eyes locked onto Nathan. Without waiting for his security detail's standard formation, Harrington began walking directly toward the farmhouse, causing a momentary scramble as agents adjusted to his unexpected movement. As he approached, Nathan could see the toll the past week had taken. Though impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Nathan's farm income, President Harrington showed subtle signs of exhaustion, slight shadows. Under his eyes, a certain tightness around his mouth. "Mr. Foster," the president said as he reached the porch steps, extending his hand. "I understand you're the man I have to thank for my daughter's life." Nathan accepted the handshake, finding the president's grip firm but not performatively strong, the handshake of a man who had nothing to prove. "I just did what needed doing, Mr. President," Nathan replied, the formal address feeling strange on his tongue. "I'm glad I was in the right place at the right time." Something flickered across President Harrington's face, a brief break-in, the carefully maintained public persona. "In my experience, Mr. Foster, being in the right place at the right time and actually taking action are very different things. Many people would have called for help and hoped for the best. You didn't hesitate to risk your life for a child you didn't know." There was a rawness to his gratitude that caught Nathan off guard. This wasn't the polished appreciation of a public figure, but the genuine emotion of a father whose child had nearly been lost. "Please," the president continued, gesturing toward the farmhouse door, "I'd appreciate a few minutes of your time." As they entered Nathan's home, followed by a reduced security detail that took positions at strategic points rather than crowding the modest kitchen, President Harrington surprised everyone by asking Sullivan and the other staff to wait outside. "Sir," Sullivan began, his professional demeanor showing the first cracks Nathan had observed, "protocol suggests I'm well aware of protocol, Marcus, the president interrupted firmly. This conversation requires privacy. Maintain standard. Security positions outside. There was a moment of visible tension, as Sullivan clearly wanted to object further, but recognized the futility of arguing with his commander-in-chief. With a tight nod, he withdrew, leaving Nathan alone with the President of the United States and just 2 security agents positioned discreetly by the doors. President Harrington turned to Nathan, his public persona dropping away more completely, now that his staff had been dismissed. Mr. Foster, what I'm about to discuss with you requires the highest level of discretion. I understand you've already signed a non-disclosure agreement, but I need your personal assurance that what we discuss remains between us. The severity in his tone conveyed more than the words themselves. This wasn't standard presidential. He cautioned, but something far more serious. You have my word, Mr. President, Nathan replied, instinctively understanding that this moment transcended normal political considerations. Harrington studied him for a moment longer, as if assessing Nathan's trustworthiness with criteria developed through years of high-stakes international negotiations. Whatever he saw appeared to satisfy him. 3 weeks ago, the president began, I received intelligence suggesting a potential compromise within our most secure communication systems, specifically the emergency protocols designed to maintain command and control of our nuclear assets during a crisis. The weight of this statement settled over Nathan like a physical presence. The president was sharing information that would typically be restricted to the highest levels of national security clearance. The investigation was proceeding with extreme caution, Harrington continued, limited to a small, trusted team when the security threat against my family emerged. What initially appeared to be an unrelated matter now seems to have been deliberately orchestrated. To kidnap Emma, Nathan said, the pieces beginning to align in his mind. The president nodded, his expression darkening. We believe the objective was to secure leverage that would force me to reveal information about our investigation, specifically which systems we had identified as compromised and which individuals were under scrutiny. He moved to the kitchen window, looking out at the farm fields, still showing the scars of the recent flooding. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is that the sophistication of the operation suggests inside knowledge of both our family security protocols and our intelligence operations. Nathan absorbed this information, understanding with growing clarity why the president had insisted on speaking with him privately, away from his usual advisors and staff. You don't know who you can trust, he said simply. President Harrington turned back to him, a grim acknowledgement in his expression. The circle of people with access to both sets of information is extremely small, Mr. Foster. Every one of them has been vetted repeatedly, has served this country faithfully for years. He paused, the personal toll of such suspicion evident in his face, and yet the evidence suggests someone within that circle is working against national interests. Where does Emma fit into this? Nathan asked, returning to his most immediate concern. And what does Osprey is compromised mean specifically? The president's expression shifted, a mixture of paternal concern and strategic calculation. Osprey is the code name for a secure communication system designed to maintain command authority during worst-case scenarios. It's one of several redundant systems, but critically important. He hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. What you need to understand, Mr. Foster, is that Emma shouldn't have known that code name or its significance. It's not something discussed around her or any family members. The fact that she used that specific phrase suggests she overheard something during the kidnapping attempt, something the perpetrator said that could help us identify them. But she didn't tell your security team, Nathan observed. She told me, a stranger, and asked me to tell only you. Exactly, Harrington confirmed, and that's why I'm here personally. Emma has refused to discuss details of what happened with anyone on my staff or security detail. She's asking to speak with you again, insisting you're the only person she trusts completely. The absurdity of the situation struck Nathan anew. The daughter of the President of the United States, surrounded by the most elite security personnel in the world, trusted only him. A struggling organic farmer she had met for less than 2 hours during a traumatic experience. Why would she trust me more than the people who protect her every day? Nathan asked. Because you acted without hesitation or calculation, the president replied simply. Emma has grown up in a world where nearly everyone who approaches her has an agenda. Her security detail is loyal and would die to protect her, but they also report everything to their superiors. Her friends are carefully screened and monitored. Even her teachers undergo background checks and surveillance. He sighed, the burden of his office momentarily visible in his posture. In her entire life, you may be the first person who simply helped her because she needed help, with no thought of advantage or protocol or political calculation. The president moved to Nathan's kitchen table, taking a seat as if the weight of the situation required it. Mr. Foster, I need to ask something significant of you, something well beyond what any citizen should be asked to do for their country. Nathan Foster was about to discover that his simple act of courage had thrust him into a world of high-level intrigue that would forever change his understanding of American leadership. As the President of the United States sat at his grandmother's kitchen table, the gravity of the situation became increasingly clear. I need you to speak with Emma again, President Harrington said, folding his hands on the worn wooden surface. She's refusing to share critical information with anyone else, including her mother and me. Something about what happened during those moments before you found her has made her deeply distrustful of our regular security channels. Nathan processed this request, studying the man across from him. Despite his powerful office, in this moment, James Harrington looked like any worried father. The weight of both personal and national security concerns etched across his features. Of course I'll speak with her, Mr. President, but I'm not sure what I can do that your intelligence professionals can't. Sometimes expertise is the problem, not the solution, Harrington replied. Emma needs someone with no agenda, no preconceptions, someone who's proven they'll act purely on human instinct. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. There's something else you should know. The vehicle you found Emma in wasn't the original transport. She was transferred to that SUV after the initial kidnapping. This new information shifted Nathan's understanding of the event. So whoever took her deliberately placed her in the flood path. That seems unnecessarily risky if the goal was to use her as leverage. Unless the flood itself was part of their cover, the president said grimly. Our working theory is that the perpetrators never intended for Emma to survive. Once they extracted whatever information they needed, her death would appear to be an unfortunate casualty of a natural disaster. The coldness of this calculation sent a chill through Nathan. They questioned a 10-year-old child about national security protocols. Emma is unusual, Harrington said, with a hint of paternal pride beneath his concern. She has an eidetic, a memory, and has been inadvertently exposed to more security information than we realized. If she overheard the right conversations, saw the right documents. He left the implication hanging. And now she'll only talk to me, Nathan said. Understanding the situation more fully, when would this happen? She's being transported here as we speak, the president replied, checking his watch. A second helicopter will arrive within 30 minutes. I've arranged for you to speak with her privately, though we'll need to maintain standard security monitoring. Of course, Mr. President. This situation has forced me to consider contingencies I never imagined implementing, Harrington continued, his voice lowering despite the secure environment. If our secure communications have indeed been compromised at the highest levels, I need to establish alternate channels outside the normal chain of command, channels that couldn't possibly have been anticipated or prepared for. The implication slowly dawned on Nathan. You want to use me as some kind of unofficial messenger? More than that, the president confirmed. I need someone with no connection to Washington, no digital footprint in government systems, someone whose involvement couldn't possibly have been planned for. Even now, I'm only sharing broad outlines. The specifics will come after you've spoken with Emma, depending on what she reveals. The sound of approaching helicopter rotors ended their conversation. President Harrington straightened his tie in a gesture that seemed more habitual than necessary. Ready yourself, Mr. Foster. What Emma shares with you may prove vital, not just to finding who targeted her, but to securing our nation's most sensitive command systems. The second helicopter, smaller than Marine One but equally secure, settled onto the makeshift landing zone with practiced precision. Unlike the president's arrival, this craft bore no markings, its black exterior designed for minimal visibility rather than ceremonial impact. Nathan watched from his porch as the door opened and security personnel emerged first, establishing a protective formation before a small figure appeared in the doorway. Emma Harrington looked simultaneously smaller and more composed than Nathan, remembered. Dressed in jeans and a simple blue sweater that intentionally avoided drawing attention, she paused at the helicopter door, scanning the farm until her eyes found Nathan. The recognition and relief that crossed her face was immediate and genuine. Without waiting for her security detail's guidance, she moved directly toward the farmhouse, causing the same momentary adjustment Nathan had observed with her father. As she approached, Nathan could see the physical similarities between father and daughter, the same determined set to the jaw, the same thoughtful assessment in her eyes. But where the president carried the weight of his office in every gesture, Emma moved with the direct purposefulness of childhood, unconstrained by political calculation. Mr. Foster, she said formally as she reached the porch, extending her hand in a gesture that seemed both rehearsed and sincere. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me. Hello again, Emma, Nathan replied, accepting her handshake with the seriousness it deserved. I'm glad to see you're doing better. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Thanks to you. The doctors said I should have had hypothermia, but you did everything right. She glanced toward her father, who had positioned himself a respectful distance away. Dad says you're a hero. He doesn't say that about many people. President Harrington approached, placing a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. Emma, Mr. Foster has agreed to speak with you privately, as you requested. I'll be nearby if you need anything. Emma nodded, her expression communicating something unspoken between father and daughter. I remember our agreement. I'll tell Mr. Foster everything, and he can decide what needs to be shared. This statement carried implications that clearly concerned the security personnel, but the president gave a single nod of acceptance. I trust Mr. Foster's judgment. As the adults withdrew to provide the requested privacy, Nathan led Emma to the farm's sunroom, a simple, glass-enclosed porch that his grandmother had added decades ago for starting seedlings. They settled into worn wicker chairs that had weathered countless seasons, an incongruously humble setting for a conversation of potential national significance. For several moments, Emma said nothing, instead studying the fields visible through the windows, the signs of the receding floodwaters still evident in the muddy terrain. "You've lived here your whole life?" she finally asked, her voice carrying the precise diction that came from the best private education. "Born and raised," Nathan confirmed. "Fourth generation on this land." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "That must be nice, having roots that deep. We move between 6 different residences depending on the season and security requirements." There was no self-pity in her observation, just a factual assessment of her unusual life. "It can be nice," Nathan acknowledged, "but every way of living has its challenges." "Like floods," Emma said, her gaze moving to the water-damaged fields. "Like floods," Nathan agreed. "Emma, your father mentioned that you wanted to tell me something about what happened before I found you, something you haven't shared with anyone else." The girl's posture changed subtly, a wariness entering her previously open demeanor. "Before I tell you, I need to know something. The man who pulled me from the car, was that really you? The whole time? No one else helped or came close to us during that time?" The question struck Nathan as odd, but he recognized its importance to her. "It was just me, Emma. I spotted the vehicle from the riverbank, swam out alone, and brought you back to my truck. We were alone until the ambulance arrived about 40 minutes later." She studied his face with an intensity disconcerting in someone so young, apparently searching for any sign of deception. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she nodded once, decisively. "When the men took me," she began, her voice steady despite the subject matter, "they knew exactly who I was, even though we were in an unmarked car with a random route. They killed Agent Pearson and Agent Michaels before they even spoke to me." She delivered this horrific information with a clinical detachment that suggested a psychological defense mechanism rather than callousness. "They had 3 men. 2 wore masks, but one didn't bother. He seemed to be in charge." She paused. "He knew things he shouldn't have known. The exact protocol my detail was following, the communication frequencies they were using, even the code phrases that should only be known to active protective detail members." Nathan listened carefully, understanding now why Emma had been so cautious about whom to trust. "You recognized him?" Emma shook her head. "Not directly, but he made a call while they were transferring me to the second vehicle. He reported to someone that the package is secured, and then said something that I memorized exactly. Osprey remains compromised at the source. Primary implementation will proceed at Artemis unless directed otherwise." She leaned forward, slightly. "Mr. Foster, I've grown up around security protocols. I know I'm not supposed to understand what those terms mean, but I've overheard things. Osprey is one of the emergency communication systems for nuclear command and control. And Artemis is a contingency location, a backup command center, in case the White House or Pentagon is compromised." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a kidnapping attempt, but part of a coordinated operation targeting the nation's most sensitive command structures. "After that call, they realized I was listening too carefully," Emma continued. "They sedated me with something. The next thing I remember clearly is being in the SUV as water started coming in. I think they assumed the flood would take care of any evidence, including me." Nathan processed this information, understanding now why Emma had been so reluctant to share it with regular security channels. If her kidnappers had inside knowledge of Secret Service protocols, the circle of potential suspects would include people directly responsible for her safety. "Why did you decide to trust me with this?" he asked gently. Emma's composure wavered slightly for the first time. "Because you had no reason to save me other than basic human decency. You didn't know who I was. You had nothing to gain. And most importantly, you weren't part of any system that could have been compromised." Her assessment, though simplified by her youth, demonstrated a perceptiveness beyond her years. Nathan recognized the terrible burden this child had been carrying, knowledge of a betrayal at the highest levels, with no way to determine who remained trustworthy. "What would you like me to do with this information, Emma?" "Tell my father directly," she said immediately. "No one else." The man without the mask said something else that scared me even more. He said, "The director confirms implementation. Window remains open for 72 hours. That was 6 days ago, Mr. Foster. The timeline sent a chill through Nathan. If Emma's recollection was accurate, whatever operation the kidnappers were part of was nearing its final stage. "I'll speak with your father immediately," Nathan promised. "Is there anything else you remember that might help identify these people?" Emma hesitated. The man without the mask had a distinctive watch, military style, but with a blue face. And when he reached across me to fasten my seatbelt in the second vehicle, I noticed a scar on his wrist, 3 parallel lines like claw marks. These details, seemingly minor, might prove crucial for identification. Nathan committed them to memory as Emma continued. "There's one more thing," she said, her voice dropping almost to a whisper. "They had the same equipment our Secret Service uses. Identical earpieces, identical tactical gear. Not similar, Mr. Foster. Identical." The implication was clear. Whoever had orchestrated Emma's kidnapping had access not just to information, but to actual government-issued security equipment. The level of penetration this suggested was deeply disturbing. As their conversation concluded, Emma seemed visibly unburdened, the weight of carrying this knowledge alone finally shared. Nathan escorted her back to where her father waited, the president's expression carefully neutral despite the obvious concern in his eyes. "Thank you for speaking with Mr. Foster," President Harrington said to his daughter, his tone gentle. "Would you mind giving us a few minutes now?" Emma nodded, glancing once more at Nathan. "Remember your promise," she said simply, before allowing a female Secret Service agent to escort her to a more comfortable waiting area inside the house. Once Emma was out of earshot, the president turned to Nathan. "What did she tell you?" Nathan repeated Emma's account precisely, including the specific phrases she had memorized and the identifying details of the unmasked kidnapper. As he spoke, Harrington's expression grew increasingly grave, the political mask giving way to a combination of paternal fury and strategic calculation. "The timeline matches our intelligence," he confirmed when Nathan had finished, "and the physical description potentially narrows our field of suspects significantly." The president glanced toward Sullivan, who waited at a respectful distance. Then back to Nathan. "This is where I need your help in a capacity I never anticipated. The information Emma has provided confirms my worst fears, that the compromise extends into our most secure systems and potentially involves individuals with direct access to both my family's security detail and our emergency command protocols." He lowered his voice further, though they stood in a secure area. "What I'm about to ask of you goes beyond normal civilian service. It carries risks I cannot fully mitigate and requires a level of discretion few would be capable of maintaining." But Nathan felt the weight of the moment, a crossroads where his simple life as a farmer intersected with matters of highest national security. "I understand, Mr. President. Whatever you need." Harrington studied him for a long moment, making a final assessment before proceeding. "I need to establish a communications channel completely outside our compromised systems, one that couldn't possibly have been anticipated by whoever is behind this. You, Mr. Foster, will serve as that channel." And the president reached into his jacket and removed what appeared to be an ordinary leather bifold wallet. "This contains a communication device, unlike anything in our standard security protocols. It was developed by a private contractor outside government procurement channels and is unknown to anyone in my administration except me." He handed the wallet to Nathan. "It appears completely normal to any inspection, electronic or physical, but when you press these 3 points simultaneously," he demonstrated on a duplicate he kept, "it establishes a direct, encrypted connection to a matching device that I alone possess." The technology was far beyond anything Nathan had encountered, yet designed to be operated by someone with no special training. The implications of what President Harrington was asking began to sink in. Nathan would become an unofficial back channel to the President of the United States, operating entirely outside the chain of command. "I'm establishing similar connections with 4 other citizens around the country," Harrington continued, "each completely unconnected to government, each chosen for demonstrated character rather than expertise. Together, you form a network that will serve as my eyes and ears outside the compromised systems until we can identify and neutralize the threat." "What exactly would you need me to do?" Nathan asked, turning the disguise device over in his hands. "For now, simply maintain your normal routine while carrying this at all times. If activated from my end, respond as promptly as circumstances allow. The connection is designed for text-based communication only, more secure and less detectable than voice." The president paused, weighing his next words carefully. "There's significant risk in what I'm asking. If those behind this compromise discover your role, they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate what they would see as a threat to their operation." Nathan considered this warning, the reality of the danger contrasting sharply with the peaceful farm surrounding them, yet he found his decision had already been made the moment he'd pulled Emma from that floodwater. "I understand the risk, Mr. President. I'll help however I can." Relief flashed briefly across Harrington's face, the reaction of a man carrying an impossible burden, finding an unexpected ally. "Thank you, Mr. Foster. Your service to this country already exceeds what most citizens will contribute in a lifetime. I won't forget it." As their conversation concluded, President Harrington's demeanor shifted subtly, the mantle of his office settling back over the momentary glimpse of the man beneath. "There's one final matter. For your protection, we need to establish a plausible explanation for my visit here today." Sullivan approached at the president's gesture, tablet in hand. "We've prepared a press statement indicating this visit was part of a new agricultural initiative focusing on flood recovery and sustainable farming practices. We'd like to take a few photographs of you showing the president around your property to support this narrative." The fabrication was necessary, Nathan understood, to obscure his actual role and protect both him and the president's strategy. For the next 30 minutes, he found himself in the surreal position of conducting a tour of his modest organic operation. For the cameras, discussing crop rotation and soil conservation with the President of the United States, as if this had been the purpose of the visit all along. As Marine One prepared for departure, President Harrington shook Nathan's hand one final time, the cameras capturing what appeared to be a routine thank you at the conclusion of a presidential farm visit. "America owes you a debt that can never be properly acknowledged," Harrington said, his words crafted to seem like standard political appreciation to any observers while conveying his genuine gratitude. "Remember, 72 hours from Emma's kidnapping. Whatever they're planning culminates tomorrow. Stay vigilant." With that cryptic warning, the president boarded his helicopter, the massive rotors stirring the air as the craft lifted off. From Nathan's east pasture, Secret Service agents and White House staff filed into their vehicles, the convoy gradually withdrawing from the property until only a small security detail remained, ostensibly to remove the temporary equipment. But, actually, Nathan now understood, to sweep for any surveillance devices and ensure his farm was secure. As the last government vehicle departed, Nathan stood on his porch, the disguised communication device in his pocket, feeling unnaturally heavy with the responsibility it represented. Rusty pressed against his leg, sensing the shift in his master's demeanor. "Well, boy," Nathan said quietly, scratching the golden retriever behind the ears, "I think our lives just got considerably more complicated." He gazed out over his fields, the evening sun casting long shadows across land his family had worked for generations. Tomorrow, he would return to the familiar rhythms of farm life, checking irrigation systems, repairing flood damage, planning the next planting cycle. But now those ordinary tasks would be performed by a man secretly connected to the highest levels of national power, awaiting a signal that might come at any moment. The contrast between his simple rural existence and the high-stakes world of national security into which he had been drawn could hardly have been more stark. Yet as he considered the trust placed in him by a frightened child and by the most powerful man in the world, Nathan felt a resolve solidifying within him. Whatever came next, he would face it with the same steady determination that had guided him into those floodwaters a week earlier. Some choices once made defined a person forever after. By saving Emma Harrington, Nathan Foster had unknowingly stepped into a role far beyond that of a simple farmer. Now he would see it through, whatever the cost. The next morning dawned, with a clarity that belied the extraordinary developments of the previous day. Nathan rose at his usual hour, the first hints of sunlight barely breaking over the eastern horizon. For a brief, disorienting moment, he wondered if the presidential visit had been an elaborate dream, until his hand brushed against the disguised communication device in his pocket. The weight of his new responsibility settled over him as he moved through his morning routine, feeding livestock, checking irrigation systems, assessing flood damage. The familiar tasks now carried a surreal quality, performed by hands that had shaken the presidents just hours earlier. "Come on, Rusty," he called to the golden retriever, watching him expectantly from the porch. "We've got damaged fencing to repair on the north boundary." As Nathan loaded tools into his truck, Sullivan's final words before departing echoed in his mind. "Maintain normal patterns. Any deviation might alert watchful eyes." The chief of staff had been surprisingly candid during the security team's final sweep, explaining that Nathan's greatest protection lay in absolute normalcy. The north boundary of Foster Farms ran alongside a wooded creek that had overflowed dramatically during the flood. Several sections of fencing had been damaged or completely washed away, leaving his property vulnerable to deer that would happily feast on his emerging organic crops. Nathan worked methodically through the morning, replacing posts and restringing wire, the physical labor providing a welcome counterpoint to the constant awareness of what lurked in his pocket. Rusty patrolled the perimeter, occasionally alerting to wildlife movements in the nearby woods. It was during a brief water break, as Nathan leaned against his truck, wiping sweat from his brow, that he noticed something unusual. At the far edge of his property where the creek bent eastward, a flash of reflected light caught his attention. There, then gone, like sunlight bouncing off glass or metal. "What do you think, boy?" he murmured to Rusty, who had already oriented toward the anomaly, ears forward in alert curiosity. "Worth checking out." Remembering Sullivan's advice about maintaining normal patterns, Nathan casually gathered his fencing tools and loaded them into the truck. If someone was observing his property, any sudden change in behavior might trigger suspicion. Instead, he drove slowly along the fence line, as if continuing his repairs, gradually making his way toward the creek bend. As he approached, Nathan kept his movements deliberate, stopping occasionally to check a fence post or make a minor adjustment to the wire. Nothing in his actions would suggest anything beyond routine maintenance to a distant observer. When he reached the creek bend, Nathan found the source of the reflection, a small, professional-grade wildlife camera attached to a tree on the far bank, its lens aimed directly at his property. Such cameras were common enough in rural areas, used by hunters to track animal movements or by conservation groups monitoring wildlife. But the positioning of this one, focused on his farm rather than the natural game trail along the creek, raised immediate concerns. Nathan deliberately kept his back to the camera as he pretended to adjust a fence post, using the moment to scan the surrounding area. The creek bank showed subtle signs of recent human presence: broken twigs, a partial boot print in drying mud, a candy wrapper caught in a bush that hadn't been carried by floodwaters but discarded recently. Someone had been watching his farm, and recently enough that the evidence hadn't been washed away by the receding flood. Nathan continued his fence work, giving no indication he'd noticed anything unusual. But his mind raced with implications. Was this related to Emma's kidnapping and the president's visit, or merely a coincidence? Perhaps a neighbor tracking deer movements or a wildlife researcher monitoring flood impacts. The communication device in his pocket suddenly felt more consequential. As he drove back toward the farmhouse, Nathan considered his options carefully. Reporting the camera might be prudent, but using the presidential back channel for what could be an innocent explanation seemed premature. Yet ignoring potential surveillance after everything he'd learned yesterday felt negligent. His decision was made for him when he returned to find a county sheriff's vehicle parked in his driveway. Sheriff Diana Reyes leaned against her patrol car, chatting amiably with Miller Jenkins, Nathan's closest neighbor, whose property adjoined his to the west. "Morning, Nathan," Sheriff Reyes called as he approached. In her late 40s with streaks of gray in her dark hair, Diana had served as Riverdale County's sheriff for nearly a decade. She'd attended school with Nathan's older sister and maintained the comfortable familiarity of small-town law enforcement. Quite the excitement yesterday, huh? Presidential visit to little old Foster Farms. Her tone was casual, but Nathan caught the professional assessment in her gaze, noting his muddy boots, work-worn hands, the tension he was trying to conceal. "Morning, Sheriff." "Miller." Nathan nodded to both, keeping his demeanor relaxed despite his internal caution. "Yeah, quite unexpected. Something about an agricultural initiative they're launching for flood-affected areas." Miller Jenkins, 60-something with the weathered face of a lifelong farmer, snorted skeptically. "Since when does the president personally scout locations for ag programs? That's what the Secretary of Agriculture is for." "Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, Miller," Nathan replied with a forced chuckle. "If the president wants to bring federal attention to our flooding issues, I'm not arguing." Sheriff Reyes studied him with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent decades reading people. "Heard they had quite a security presence out here. Thorough, were they?" The question seemed innocent enough, but Nathan sensed a purpose behind it. "Very. Checked everything before he arrived, swept everything after he left. Standard protocol, I guess." "Standard for the president, maybe. Not so standard for Riverdale County." Reyes pushed herself away from her vehicle. "Mind if I have a word in private, Nathan? Official business." Miller took the hint, climbing into his battered pickup with a wave. "Don't forget the Grange meeting tonight, Nathan. Flood recovery planning. We need your voice there." "I'll be there," Nathan promised, watching as Miller's truck disappeared down the long driveway before turning his attention back to the sheriff. "What's this about, Diana?" She glanced around, ensuring they were truly alone. "Let's talk inside." Once in Nathan's kitchen, Sheriff Reyes declined his offer of coffee and got straight to the point. "Two things you should know. First, we found an abandoned vehicle yesterday evening, about 3 miles downstream from where you rescued that girl last week. Black Suburban, government plates, 2 bodies inside." Nathan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the spring air coming through the open window. Emma's Secret Service detail. "Second," Reyes continued, watching his reaction closely. I've had 3 different federal agencies contact my office in the past 24 hours, all asking questions about you. FBI, Homeland Security, and some outfit that wouldn't identify themselves but had authorizations signed by someone high up in the defense department. She leaned forward, lowering her voice despite the fact they were alone in the house. Nathan, I've known you since you were riding the school bus with my daughter. Never known you to be mixed up in anything that would warrant this kind of attention. You want to tell me what's really going on? The question presented an immediate dilemma. Diana Reyes was as honorable a public servant as Nathan had ever known, but the president's warnings about trust extended to everyone. The compromise Emma had described reached into the highest levels of government. How could Nathan be certain that Sheriff Reyes wasn't being manipulated or monitored by those same forces? The girl I pulled from the flood, he said carefully. She wasn't just any child. Recognition dawned in the sheriff's eyes. The president's agricultural initiative was just a cover story, wasn't it? His visit had something to do with the girl you rescued. Nathan weighed his next words with extreme care. Diana, I've signed multiple non-disclosure agreements that prevent me from discussing certain aspects of yesterday's visit. What I can tell you is that there are sensitive matters involved that extend beyond our county. Sheriff Reyes studied him, professional assessment battling with personal concern. Nathan, whatever you're involved in has attracted serious attention. Not just federal agencies asking questions, but other interests too. My deputies have reported unfamiliar vehicles conducting surveillance in the area around your property. Professionals, not locals. This confirmed Nathan's earlier suspicions about the wildlife camera. What kind of vehicles? Dark SUVs primarily. No plates, or plates that come back registered to shell companies. And there's something else. She hesitated. 2 of my deputies were approached yesterday by men claiming to be federal agents. Asked a lot of questions about your routine, property, layout, whether you lived alone. The credentials they presented seemed legitimate. But when my office called to verify afterward, the agencies in question denied having personnel in our jurisdiction. The implications were chilling. Whoever was behind Emma's kidnapping was now focusing their attention on Nathan, the unexpected variable in their otherwise meticulously planned operation. Diana, I need you to be extremely careful, Nathan said, abandoning pretense. What you're describing suggests sophisticated operators with resources and reach. Don't put yourself or your deputies at risk over this. The sheriff's expression hardened. This is my county, Nathan. If someone's conducting unauthorized surveillance or impersonating federal officers here, that's my business. She reached across the table, her calloused hand gripping his arm. But I need to know what we're dealing with. Are you in danger? The earnest concern in her eyes nearly broke through Nathan's caution. Diana Reyes represented everything good. About small-town America, integrity, community responsibility, unflinching courage. If there was anyone in Riverdale County he would trust with his life, it was her. But the president's warnings echoed in his mind. The compromise extended to the highest levels of government security. Trust no one who wasn't personally verified by the president himself. I can't answer that definitively, Nathan replied honestly. But I would appreciate if your patrols happen to drive by my property more frequently in the coming days. Not, obviously, just in the normal course of duties. Sheriff Reyes nodded, understanding the unspoken request. Already arranged. And Nathan, my personal cell is always on, any hour, any concern, no matter how small. As she prepared to leave, Diana paused at the door. Almost forgot. There was one more thing. A message came through for you at the department. This morning, caller wouldn't identify themselves, just asked that I tell you Artemis activates tonight. Mean anything to you? Nathan kept his expression neutral through sheer force of will, even as his mind raced. Artemis, the contingency location Emma had mentioned, the backup command center for nuclear authorization protocols. Probably Miller getting cute about tonight's Grange meeting, he deflected with a casual shrug. He's been calling it Project Artemis because he thinks it sounds more important than Flood Committee. The sheriff didn't appear entirely convinced, but didn't press further. All right then. Be careful, Nathan. Something's not right here, and until we know what it is, assume nothing is coincidental. After Sheriff Reyes departed, Nathan moved through his house methodically, checking windows and doors, drawing curtains, to block sightlines from outside. He needed time to think, to process the implications of what he'd just learned. The wildlife camera, the suspicious vehicles, false federal agents asking questions about him, all pointed to a level of interest far beyond what his role should have attracted if the operation was focused solely on compromising national command systems. Why would resources be diverted to monitor a farmer in rural Ohio unless he represented a specific threat? The answer came in a sudden, chilling realization. Emma hadn't just told him about Osprey and Artemis. She had provided specific, identifiable details about her kidnapper that could lead to his identification. The distinctive watch, the three-line scar on the wrist, the unmasked face that Emma could potentially identify. Nathan wasn't just a communication back channel now. He was a witness with information that could expose the entire operation. And, according to Sheriff Reyes's message, whatever was planned for the Artemis facility was happening tonight. The culmination of the 72-hour window Emma had overheard her captors discussing. Nathan's hand moved to the disguised communication device in his pocket. The president needed to know immediately about the surveillance, the sheriff's warning, and most critically, the message about Artemis. Yet using the device carried its own risks. If sophisticated operators were monitoring his property, they might detect the encrypted transmission. Making his decision, Nathan moved to the cellar door. The farm's root cellar, dug deep into the earth and lined with concrete during his grandfather's time, would provide better insulation against electronic surveillance. Once below ground, Nathan activated the device as the president had shown. Him pressing the 3 points simultaneously, the seemingly ordinary wallet transformed, a small screen illuminating within its interior. Nathan typed his message with deliberate concision. Property under surveillance. Sheriff reports false. Federal agents asking questions. Message delivered through sheriff. Artemis activates tonight. And the wildlife camera found on creek boundary. Maintaining normal routine, but situation escalating. After sending the encrypted message, Nathan returned to the main floor, mind racing with contingency plans. The Grange meeting tonight would provide a plausible reason to leave his farm without arousing suspicion. But if he was under surveillance, his movements would be tracked. Any deviation from his stated destination might alert whoever was watching. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. The caller ID showed Miller Jenkins' number. "Nathan," Miller's voice came through, uncharacteristically tense. "Change of plans for tonight's meeting. We're moving it to the old Mason property barn instead of the Grange Hall. Something about electrical problems at the hall." The hairs on Nathan's neck rose. The Mason property was isolated, accessible only by a single dirt road, bordered by dense woods that would provide perfect cover for an ambush. And Miller's tone was wrong, too formal, too precise for the normally casual farmer. "Who made that call, Miller?" Nathan asked carefully, a slight hesitation. "County administrator said the Grange Hall failed some safety inspection this morning." Another red flag. The county administrator was on vacation in Florida. Nathan had seen her vacation photos posted on social media just yesterday. "Thanks for letting me know," Nathan replied, keeping his voice casual. "What time are we starting?" 8 o'clock, don't be late. We've got a lot to cover." As the call ended, Nathan's suspicions crystallized into certainty. The changed meeting location was a trap, likely designed to lure him to an isolated area where he could be questioned or eliminated without witnesses. Miller might be an unwitting part of this deception, or possibly coerced into cooperation. The communication device in his pocket vibrated quietly. The president's response confirms intel from other sources. Artemis facility showing unusual access patterns. Stay at your location. Security team en route to you. ETA 45 minutes. Trust no one until verification code Delta 9 Echo is provided in person. The message confirmed Nathan's worst fears while offering the promise of imminent support. 45 minutes, however, felt like an eternity given the rapidly evolving situation. If sophisticated operators believed he possessed information that could compromise their operation, they wouldn't hesitate to move against him before reinforcements arrived. Nathan moved quickly through the house, gathering essential supplies: water, his grandfather's old service revolver from the gun cabinet, a first aid kit, and emergency flashlights. If he needed to hold out or even flee before the security team arrived, basic preparation could make the difference. As he worked, memories of his military grandfather's lessons surfaced. Old Thomas Foster had served in military intelligence during the Cold War and had occasionally shared wisdom that had seemed paranoid to a young Nathan, but now felt prescient. If you're ever in a situation where you don't know who to trust, change the parameters. Don't react to their game. Make them react to yours. The advice crystallized Nathan's next move. Rather than waiting passively for either the security team or potential hostiles to arrive, he would create a distraction that served two purposes: diverting attention from his actual location while potentially revealing which locals might be working with the surveillance team. Moving to his desk, Nathan called the local volunteer fire department, where he occasionally helped during harvest season. "Jim? Nathan Foster. Listen, I just spotted smoke coming from the abandoned Ferguson silo on County Road 7. Looks like it. Might be kids messing around, but with all the dry brush around there after the flood, thought someone should check it out." The Ferguson property, vacant for years, sat in the opposite direction from both his farm and the Mason barn. Emergency vehicles responding there would draw attention and resources away from his location. More importantly, anyone watching his property would likely observe him making the call and assume his attention was focused eastward. Next, Nathan called Sheriff Reyes directly. "Diana, it's Nathan. Listen carefully, but don't react. The Grange meeting location change is suspicious. County administrator supposedly ordered it, but she's in Florida. I think someone's setting up an ambush at the Mason barn tonight." The sheriff's response was measured, professional. "Understood. I'll look into it discreetly. Any other concerns I should be aware of?" "I've got a security team coming to my farm, ETA about 40 minutes now. Legitimate federal response. They'll identify with code Delta 9 Echo. Anyone else who shows up is not friendly." "Copy that. I'll keep units nearby but not visible. Be careful, Nathan." With these precautions in place, Nathan faced his most difficult decision. The president's instructions were clear: stay put and wait for the security team. But if hostiles were closing in, the farmhouse presented a vulnerable target with limited escape routes. The surrounding fields, though open, offered multiple paths to the wooded creek boundary, where he could evade pursuers if necessary. A dust cloud in the distance, visible through the kitchen window, made the decision for him. Two vehicles approaching rapidly down his long driveway, not the expected security team, who were still at least 30 minutes away, according to the president's timeline. Nathan's survival instincts kicked into high gear. Grabbing his prepared pack and whistling for Rusty to follow, he slipped out the back door and moved quickly toward the equipment barn. Inside, his old farm truck, not the newer one parked visibly, by the house, waited, keys already in the ignition, as was his habit on the isolated property. As Nathan started the engine, he caught sight of the approaching vehicles through the barn's side window, black SUVs without visible markings, exactly matching Sheriff Reyes's description of the suspicious surveillance teams. 4 men emerged from the first vehicle before it had fully stopped, their movements displaying the coordinated precision of professional operators. They wore civilian clothes but moved with military discipline, fanning out to establish a perimeter around the farmhouse. Nathan recognized the deliberate efficiency of their movements. These weren't law enforcement officers serving a warrant or security personnel making a friendly contact. This was a tactical team executing a prepared operation, likely an extraction or elimination. The barn's rear door, normally used for moving large equipment into the fields, offered an escape route invisible from the house. Nathan eased the truck forward, keeping the engine at low RPMs to minimize noise. Rusty sat quietly beside him, the dog's normally exuberant behavior subdued as if sensing the danger. Once clear of the barn, Nathan turned onto the rutted farm track that led through his back fields toward the creek boundary. The path, barely visible among emerging crops, would be undetectable to anyone not intimately familiar with the property. It wound through a depression that would keep the vehicle hidden from view until it reached the tree line. In his rearview mirror, Nathan caught glimpses of the tactical team approaching his house, weapons now visibly drawn. Their arrival less than 15 minutes after he'd sent the message to the president suggested they had indeed been monitoring his communications or movements, reacting immediately to his contact with Washington. As he reached the wooded creek boundary, Nathan faced another decision point. The bridge that normally allowed farm equipment to cross the creek had been damaged in the flood, leaving the waterway as a natural barrier between his property and the state forest beyond. Crossing here would require abandoning the vehicle and proceeding on foot, slower but offering better concealment. The decision was made for him when the distinctive crack of a rifle shot echoed across the fields. They had discovered his absence and spotted his vehicle. Nathan accelerated, pushing the old truck through the shallow part of the creek where the bridge had once stood. Water splashed over the hood as the tires fought for traction on the creek bed, the engine straining against the current. For one heart-stopping moment, the truck seemed caught, tires spinning in the muddy bottom. Then suddenly it lurched forward, climbing the far bank and entering the dense forest beyond. Nathan drove as deep into the trees as the overgrown logging, rode aloud before the vegetation became too thick to proceed. "This is as far as we go by vehicle, boy," he told Rusty, grabbing his pack and the communication device. "From here, we move quietly." As they abandoned the truck, Nathan activated the communication device once more. Hostiles on property. Black SUV's tactical team of at least 6, armed and aggressive, have evacuated to state forest east of farm, will proceed to emergency rendezvous point. The emergency rendezvous point was a precaution Sullivan had established during the security team's departure, an old fire tower deep in the state forest, accessible only by foot trails and offering visibility in all directions. If Nathan could reach it before his pursuers caught up, he'd have defensible high ground and clear sightlines. Moving through the forest with Rusty at his side, Nathan drew on skills honed through a lifetime of hunting these same woods. He selected his path carefully, avoiding open areas, using streams to mask his trail, and moving steadily deeper into the wilderness that bordered his property. Behind him, faintly through the trees, came the sounds of pursuit, vehicle doors slamming, voices calling to each other, the occasional crackle of radio communication. They were organized and determined, but Nathan had the advantage of intimate knowledge of this terrain, every hollow, ridge, and hidden game trail. As he crested a small rise that provided momentary visibility, Nathan caught sight of the fire tower in the distance, its metal frame silhouetted against the late afternoon sky. Perhaps 2 miles away through difficult terrain, it represented his best hope for survival until the president's security team could locate him. With renewed determination, Nathan checked the communication device one last time before moving deeper into the forest. The president's response was brief but clear. Security team rerouted to your location. Satellite tracking activated on your device. Artemis situation confirmed critical. Stay alive, Nathan. Your information may be key to preventing catastrophe. The message reinforced the stakes of his survival. This wasn't just about one farmer's life. It connected directly to whatever operation was unfolding at the Artemis facility tonight. National security, perhaps even nuclear command protocols, hung in the balance. With Rusty leading the way, alert to sounds and scents that human senses might miss, Nathan pushed deeper into the gathering darkness of the forest. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous, but surrender was not an option. Whatever came next, he would face it with the same courage that had driven him into floodwaters to save a child he didn't know. The instinctive determination to do what was right, regardless of the cost. Behind him, the sounds of pursuit grew, more organized, more purposeful. The hunters knew their quarry now, and the race against both human predators and fading daylight had begun in earnest. Twilight descended on the forest as Nathan navigated the increasingly difficult terrain. Each step required careful consideration. Noise discipline was critical with pursuers behind him, yet speed remained essential. The old fire tower, now visible in fleeting glimpses between the trees, offered his best chance for a defensible position. "Easy, Rusty," Nathan whispered as the dog's ears pricked forward, detecting something beyond human perception. The golden retriever had proven invaluable, alerting to the pursuit team's flanking attempts twice already. Nathan trusted the animal's instincts more than his own in these woods as darkness fell. The communication device vibrated in his pocket. Crouching behind a fallen oak, Nathan checked the secure message from the president. Satellite confirms 6 hostiles in pursuit pattern. Security team 18 minutes out. Artemis facility reporting unauthorized access attempts. Critical to extract. You with intelligence intact. Nathan's mind raced at the implications. Whatever was happening at the Artemis facility, the backup nuclear command center Emma had mentioned was occurring simultaneously with the pursuit. This wasn't coincidence. It was coordination. The team hunting him through the forest was likely providing distraction or eliminating witnesses, while the main operation targeted national security systems. A twig snapped in the distance, closer than expected. They were gaining ground despite his woodcraft. These weren't casual trackers, but professional operators with tactical training and likely night vision capabilities. The natural advantages of a local who knew every ridge and hollow were diminishing with the light. Nathan studied the remaining route to the fire tower. The most direct path crossed an open meadow that would leave him exposed. The alternative, following the forested ridgeline, would add precious minutes to his journey, but provide cover. With the security team still more than 15 minutes away, concealment seemed the wiser choice. "This way, boy," he whispered, guiding Rusty toward the denser woodland, climbing the steep eastern slope. The dog moved silently alongside him, occasionally glancing back toward their pursuers with alert concern. As they climbed, Nathan's thoughts turned to his family legacy on this land. 4 generations of Fosters had weathered hardships here. Economic depressions, droughts, floods, personal tragedies. His grandfather had often said that the land didn't just support their bodies through its harvests, but strengthened their spirits through its challenges. "Land demands honesty," he would say. "You can't bargain with nature or talk your way around a failed crop. You face reality and find a way forward." That inheritance of resilience flowed through Nathan now, transforming fear into focused determination. Each careful step, each decision in this lethal game of cat and mouse drew on generations of problem-solving and perseverance coded into his DNA. A sudden burst of radio static echoed through the trees, one of his pursuers, closer than expected. Nathan froze, Rusty instantly motionless beside him. The voice that followed was low but distinct in the evening stillness. Delta Team, target heading northeast toward the fire tower. Alpha Team will cut off escape route from the north. Bravo. Team, maintain pursuit. Remember, we need him alive initially for questioning. The clinical detachment in that last instruction sent ice through Nathan's veins. These weren't law enforcement officers making an arrest. They were operatives with an objective that ultimately ended with his elimination. Adjusting his route, Nathan angled more easterly, away from where the Alpha Team was apparently moving to intercept him. The fire tower remained his objective, but he would need to approach from an unexpected direction to avoid the trap being set. The ridge steepened dramatically, forcing Nathan to use his hands for balance as he climbed. Any normal pursuit would likely have opted for an easier route, but these were not normal pursuers. Glancing back, he caught the faint glow of what must be night vision equipment moving steadily upslope behind him. Reaching the ridgetop, Nathan was confronted with an unexpected advantage. A summer thunderstorm was building to the west, massive. Clouds illuminated from within by lightning that hadn't yet reached the ground. The approaching weather system would complicate things for everyone, but it offered one immediate benefit. The changing barometric pressure was driving air upward along the ridge, carrying his scent away from the pursuers rather than toward them. Nathan took a moment to orient himself, identifying the fire tower now visible across a narrow valley. Perhaps 3/4 of a mile remained, but the route would require descending into the valley before climbing to the tower. In the growing darkness, with teams actively hunting him, each transition represented serious vulnerability. The communication device vibrated again. The president's message was terse. Security team engaged with hostile elements. Delayed. Sheriff's office reporting firefight near your farm. Find secure position and await extraction. Authorization protocols at Artemis compromised. Situation critical. The update dramatically changed Nathan's calculus. The cavalry wasn't coming, at least not soon enough. The security team had encountered resistance, likely from additional hostile forces beyond those pursuing him through the forest. And most critically, whatever operation was targeting the nation's nuclear command systems was succeeding. Rusty growled softly, ears forward, staring intently into the darkness behind them. The pursuit was closing in. Nathan made his decision quickly. The fire tower was now an unreachable objective before contact with hostiles. Instead, he needed to use the approaching storm and his superior knowledge of the terrain to maximum advantage. "Come on, boy," he whispered, turning away from the tower and moving along the ridgeline. Half a mile ahead lay Devil's Hollow, a steep, rocky ravine that locals avoided due to its treacherous footing. Nathan had explored it extensively as a teenager, however, and knew its secrets intimately. Moving as quickly as safety allowed, Nathan and Rusty followed the ridgeline until they reached the head of the ravine. Lightning flashed more frequently now, briefly illuminating the rugged landscape around them. The first distant rumbles of thunder provided useful audio cover for their movement. The ravine dropped away before them, a near vertical descent of tumbled boulders and stunted trees that had adapted to the harsh conditions. Local legends told of Native Americans using this place to ambush pursuing enemies, the narrow confines and difficult terrain creating perfect defensive positions against superior numbers. "Steady now," Nathan encouraged Rusty as they began the precarious descent. Each handhold required careful testing, each footfall demanded perfect balance. The golden retriever, despite lacking hands, navigated with surprising grace, his low center of gravity an advantage on the steep incline. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit had faded temporarily. Nathan suspected their hunters had continued toward the fire tower, following what they believed would be his logical destination. This granted a brief advantage, but one that would evaporate quickly once they realized their quarry had changed direction. Halfway down the ravine, Nathan located what he'd been searching for, a narrow, horizontal crevice in the rock face, partially hidden by a fallen tree. As a teenager, he had discovered this natural feature extended nearly 30 feet into the hillside, creating a shallow cave large enough for a person to shelter in, but easily overlooked if you didn't know exactly where to search. "In here, Rusty," Nathan directed, clearing debris from the entrance and helping the dog navigate the awkward entry. Once inside, the space opened slightly, allowing them to move further from the entrance where they might be spotted. The timing proved fortunate. As Nathan settled deeper into the crevice, voices became audible from the ridgeline above, the pursuit teams converging as they realized their target had deviated from the expected route. "Thermal imaging shows nothing at the tower," a voice reported, distorted by radio transmission but clear enough in the night air. "Last confirmed tracks lead this direction before disappearing. Spread out and search the ridge systematically," another voice commanded. "He can't have vanished. The director wants him found before the operation concludes." Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the ravine in stark relief. Thunder followed almost immediately. The storm was nearly overhead. Now, the first heavy raindrops began to fall, striking the forest canopy with audible impacts before finding their way to the ground. Nathan allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The approaching deluge would obliterate any remaining tracks and significantly hamper thermal imaging technology. Nature, which had threatened his farm with destructive flooding days earlier, now offered protection in its latest manifestation. Inside the crevice, Nathan activated the communication device, once more keeping the screen shielded to prevent any light from betraying their position, pursued by multiple teams. Currently concealed, but surrounded, hostile radio communications reference the director and operation timeline. Unable to reach rendezvous point. Request immediate sitrep on Artemis situation. The response came almost immediately. "Artemis. Facility reporting security breach in progress. Emergency protocols initiated. Critical that you survive with intelligence intact. Verification. Emma says, the man who saved me had a dog named Rusty who knew I was in trouble before his master did." The personal verification, information only the real Emma Harrington could have provided, confirmed the communication remained secure. The president was still personally monitoring the situation despite whatever crisis was unfolding at the nuclear command facility. As rain began falling in earnest, Nathan considered his options. The natural shelter would protect them temporarily, but the systematic search pattern the hostiles had initiated would eventually cover the entire area. His advantage lay in intimate knowledge of the landscape and the approaching storm's impact on their technology and visibility. Lightning struck. Nearby, the thunderclap instantaneous and deafening. Rusty pressed closer to Nathan, the dog's natural weather anxiety temporarily overriding his trained composure. The storm's intensity was building rapidly, typical of the powerful systems that swept across the Ohio Valley in spring. Through the crevice opening, Nathan observed the searchers' flashlight beams bobbing along the ridgeline, occasionally sweeping down into the ravine. They were being thorough, but struggling against the deteriorating conditions. Several times, voices raised, in frustration, as footing became treacherous on the rain-slicked rocks. Another message arrived from the president, Sheriff Reyes requesting your location to provide extraction support, can provide verification code Delta 9 Echo in person, authorized disclosure. Nathan considered the offer carefully. Diana Reyes had proven trustworthy throughout his life, and her department represented the closest potential allies. Yet, the sophistication of the operation targeting him suggested resources and intelligence that might compromise even the sheriff's department. Before he could respond, a new development commanded his attention. One of the searchlights had paused at the head of the ravine, its beam systematically scanning the rocky terrain below. The methodical movement suggested a trained operator rather than a panicked sweep. "I've got possible tracks entering the ravine," a voice called out, barely audible over the intensifying storm, "requesting additional units to establish containment at the bottom while we conduct detailed search." The net was tightening. Nathan made his decision quickly, responding to the president. "Authorized disclosure to Sheriff Reyes, personally only. Currently in Devil's Hollow Ravine, eastern slope, approximately 30 feet below ridgeline, in concealed rock crevice. Hostiles closing in. Need immediate extraction." As he sent the message, Nathan prepared for potential discovery. The old service. Revolver was loaded, but represented a last resort against superior numbers with likely superior firepower. His best advantage remained the environment itself, the treacherous terrain made more dangerous by the storm, the limited visibility, and his familiarity with escape routes from this position. Rusty suddenly tensed, his attention fixed on the crevice entrance. Nathan instinctively moved deeper into the recess, pulling the dog with him into the shadows. Seconds later, a beam of light swept across the opening, pausing briefly before continuing its search pattern. The next flash of lightning changed everything. For a brief, frozen moment, the entire ravine was illuminated in harsh detail, including, Nathan realized with sinking certainty, his and Rusty's tracks leading directly to their hiding place. The rain hadn't come soon enough to erase all evidence of their passage. The shout that followed confirmed his fears. Tracks leading into the rocks, possible hiding place. Nathan's hand moved to the revolver, even as he searched his memory for alternative exits from their position. As a teenager exploring this crevice, he discovered it narrowed significantly toward the back, but didn't completely terminate. A tight squeeze led to a vertical chimney that emerged elsewhere on the ravine face. Whether an adult could navigate, that passage remained untested. "Rusty, stay close," he whispered, moving deeper into the crevice as flashlight beams converged on the entrance. The dog followed obediently, sensing the increased tension in his master's voice. The passage narrowed uncomfortably as they retreated, the ceiling dropping until Nathan was forced to crouch, then crawl. Behind them, voices grew louder as the pursuit team approached the crevice entrance. "Target confirmed inside. Prepare for extraction. Subject considered armed and dangerous. Authorization for necessary force granted." The clinical detachment. In these communications strengthened Nathan's resolve. These weren't law enforcement officers making an arrest, but operatives executing a mission with his elimination as the likely endpoint. The narrow passage continued to constrict until Nathan feared they had reached a dead end. Rusty whined softly as the space became challenging, even for the dog to navigate. Then Nathan's groping hand encountered what he'd been searching for. The vertical chimney, a natural fault in the rock that extended upward through the ravine wall. A sound at the crevice entrance spurred immediate action. Nathan hoisted Rusty upward, helping the struggling dog find purchase in the chimney. The golden retriever, understanding the urgency if not the specific danger, scrambled upward with determined effort. Nathan followed immediately, wedging himself into the vertical passage and using counter-pressure techniques to inch upward. The chimney was tighter than he remembered, the body of an adult man filling the space his teenage frame had navigated with relative ease. Each movement required careful calculation, bracing feet and back against opposite walls to maintain position. Below, flashlights illuminated the crevice as the pursuit team entered. Their voices echoed in the confined space. "Tracks lead all. The way back. No sign of exit. He's in here somewhere. Advance carefully." The chimney continued upward, occasionally widening enough to allow slightly faster progress before narrowing again to challenging dimensions. Nathan's arms burned, with effort, legs trembling as they supported his weight in awkward positions. Above him, Rusty had reached some sort of opening, his silhouette briefly visible against a lightning-illuminated sky before disappearing from view. A shout from below indicated discovery of the chimney. "There's a vertical passage here! He's climbing out!" The revelation accelerated Nathan's efforts, despite exhaustion threatening to overcome his straining muscles. The chimney widened slightly as it approached the surface, allowing more effective movement. With a final surge of determination, Nathan pulled himself through the opening into the pouring rain. The exit emerged on a narrow ledge part-way down. The ravine face, invisible from both above and below due to the rock's natural overhang. Rusty waited anxiously, pressing against Nathan's leg as soon as he appeared. "Good boy!" Nathan gasped, fighting to control his breathing while assessing their position. The ledge extended about 20 feet along the ravine wall before terminating at what appeared to be a game trail, angling downward through scrubby vegetation. Lightning revealed their immediate surroundings in stark detail. The storm had reached its full intensity, rain falling in sheets that limited visibility to mere yards. Thunder boomed continuously, the overlapping peals suggesting multiple lightning strikes throughout the vicinity. The communication device vibrated against his chest. The president's message offered unexpected hope. "Sheriff Reyes approaching. Your location from southwest with 3 deputies. ETA 12 minutes. Hostiles believed unaware of law enforcement presence. Security team re-engaging after neutralizing resistance. Artemis situation critical, but contained temporarily. Hold position if possible." For the first time since fleeing his farm, Nathan felt the faintest flicker of optimism. Help was coming, not from distant federal resources, but from neighbors he had known his entire life, led by a sheriff whose integrity he trusted implicitly. The moment of hope was short-lived. A beam of light emerged from the chimney passage behind them, followed by a voice calling to others. "He's gone through. There's an opening to a ledge." Nathan and Rusty retreated along the narrow shelf, moving away from the chimney exit toward the game trail at its far end. The footing was treacherous, the stone slick with rain, visibility limited to brief illumination during lightning flashes. Reaching the game trail, Nathan paused to get his bearings. The path descended steeply, switchbacking down the ravine face toward the creek that had carved this formation over millennia. During normal conditions, that creek was a gentle flow easily crossed on stepping stones. After today's deluge, it would be a raging torrent, both an obstacle and potential protection. "Down we go, Rusty," Nathan encouraged, beginning the descent carefully. The golden retriever moved with natural caution, instinctively testing each footing before committing his weight. This understanding transformed Nathan's tactical situation. The pursuit team wasn't simply following orders from unnamed superiors. They were directed by the same man who had shaken Nathan's hand on his farm and thanked him for saving Emma Harrington. The same man who had complete knowledge of extraction protocols, rendezvous locations, and security team movements. "They've crossed the creek," a voice called from the opposite bank. "Alpha team move to intercept on the logging road. Bravo team, find a crossing point." Nathan and Rusty moved quickly into the forest, heading away from both the creek and the logging road where hostiles awaited. The vegetation provided cover, but slowed their progress significantly. Tangles of storm-damaged branches and rain-softened ground, creating natural obstacles at every turn. Another message arrived from the president. Sullivan confirmed as network compromise source. All protocols he established considered compromised. Disregard previous rendezvous coordinates. Sheriff Reyes reports position 400 yards northeast of your current location near lightning-struck oak visible on ridgeline. Security team ETA revised to 8 minutes. Artemis situation stabilizing. The update provided crucial guidance. Nathan oriented himself using the lightning-struck oak now visible on the near horizon during illumination flashes. Sheriff Reyes and her deputies represented his closest potential allies, positioned between his current location and the hostile perimeter on the logging road. With renewed determination, Nathan pushed forward through the difficult terrain, Rusty, staying close as they navigated by intermittent lightning flashes. The knowledge that trustworthy help waited ahead provided motivation beyond physical exhaustion or the natural fear of armed pursuers. The sounds of organized search patterns faded behind them as the pursuit team struggled with the creek crossing that Nathan and Rusty had barely managed. This granted precious minutes to cover ground toward the sheriff's position, though the challenging terrain and storm conditions limited their speed. As they approached the lightning-struck oak, Nathan's instincts warned him to proceed with caution. Even with the president's verification, standard tactical protocols demanded treating any contact as potentially hostile until confirmed friendly. "Sheriff Reyes," Nathan called out, his voice barely carrying above the storm. "Delta 9 Echo verification requested." The response came immediately from behind a fallen tree 20 yards ahead. "Delta 9 Echo confirmed, Nathan. Move to my position." Relief flooded through him at Diana Reyes's familiar voice, providing the correct verification code. Nathan and Rusty covered the remaining distance quickly, finding the sheriff and 2 deputies established in defensive positions around the massive fallen oak. "Took the scenic route, I see," Sheriff Reyes commented dryly as Nathan joined them, her professional demeanor belied by the genuine concern in her eyes. Despite being soaked to the skin and mud splattered from the difficult terrain, the sheriff maintained the calm competence that had earned her the county's trust through multiple terms. "You could say that," Nathan acknowledged, gratitude for the friendly faces overwhelming exhaustion momentarily. "Thank you for coming after me." Turns out, when the President of the United States personally calls your office, it motivates prompt response, Reyes replied with a hint of her characteristic humor. More seriously, she added, "I've got Deputy Collins here with me, plus Rodriguez, covering our flank. Martinez is down, took a round in the shoulder when we engaged hostiles on the logging road. He's stable but needs medical attention once we're clear." The deputy's injury sobered Nathan further. Local law enforcement officers were now bleeding because of his connection to events far beyond Riverdale County's normal concerns. "The president mentioned you neutralized hostile elements on the road," Nathan asked, seeking tactical clarity. Sheriff Reyes nodded grimly. "3 operators with military-grade weapons and equipment. No identification, no cooperation. They opened fire immediately upon contact." She paused. "Nathan, these aren't law enforcement or legitimate federal agents. They're something else entirely." "They're working for Marcus Sullivan, the president's chief of staff," Nathan confirmed, sharing what he'd learned. "Part of a larger operation targeting nuclear command systems." The revelation landed heavily, even among officers accustomed to maintaining composure. Deputy Collins whispered a soft expletive while Rodriguez tightened his grip on his service weapon. "The president's security team is allegedly 8 minutes out," Reyes noted, checking her watch. "But given Sullivan's involvement, I'm not inclined to trust any federal response until we have absolute verification." Her caution aligned with Nathan's own thinking. "Agreed, we should move toward extraction, but maintain defensive posture until proper verification." The communication device vibrated with urgent notification from the president. Sullivan's team breached final security protocols at Artemis facility. Emergency presidential authorization codes compromised. Security team confirms 7 minutes to your position. Critical that you reach extraction point with intelligence intact. The stakes had escalated beyond anything Nathan could have imagined. When he'd pulled Emma from that floodwater days earlier, what began as a simple rescue had led to the compromise of America's Nuclear Command Authority, and his testimony about Emma's kidnapper had become critical national security intelligence. Sheriff Reyes studied the dark forest around them, her expression resolute. "We move as a unit toward the extraction point. Rodriguez takes point, I'll cover rear. Nathan and Deputy Collins in the protected center position with Rusty." As they prepared to move out, Nathan placed his hand briefly on Sheriff Reyes's shoulder. "Diana, thank you. You and your deputies risked everything coming after me." The sheriff's weathered face softened momentarily. "This is Riverdale County. Nathan, we look after our own." With characteristic understatement, she added, "Though I admit, presidential emergencies aren't covered in the standard sheriff's handbook." With a nod toward Rodriguez, Sheriff Reyes initiated movement. The small group advanced through the storm-battered forest, maintaining tactical spacing while progressing toward the extraction coordinates the president had provided. Nathan found his thoughts turning to Emma Harrington, the brave child whose precise observations and remarkable recall had unraveled a conspiracy reaching to the highest levels of government. Her trust in him, a stranger who had pulled her from floodwaters, had set in motion events that might ultimately preserve the nation's most critical security systems. As lightning illuminated their path forward, Nathan reflected that courage often emerged from ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. A farmer who couldn't ignore a child in danger, a county sheriff who wouldn't abandon a lifelong neighbor, a 10-year-old girl who maintained her wits during unimaginable trauma. Through the trees ahead, flashing lights became visible, not the tactical lights of pursuit teams, but the steady blue and red of law enforcement vehicles. The extraction point was within reach. Storm clouds continued their domination of the night sky, but between their dark masses, occasional breaks revealed glimpses of stars, distant, constant points of light that had guided travelers through difficult terrain for millennia. Nathan took their appearance as a promising sign as their small group moved forward towards safety, carrying with them intelligence that might prove vital to the nation's security. Whatever challenges awaited beyond this forest, debriefings, protective custody, testimony against a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government, Nathan would face them with the same determination that had carried him through this night. The simple act of saving a child from drowning had revealed character that even he hadn't known he possessed, a resilience and courage that rose to meet increasingly difficult challenges. As they approached the extraction point, Rusty pressed against Nathan's leg, the faithful companion who had proven invaluable throughout their ordeal. Together, they had survived a night that would reshape their lives forever, carrying forward a story that began with an impulsive dive into floodwaters and culminated in uncovering a plot that threatened the nation's most critical security systems. The extraction team waited at the forest's edge, their verification codes confirmed through multiple channels. As Nathan prepared to step from the protective canopy of trees into the clearing where vehicles waited, he caught Sheriff Reyes watching him with an expression that combined pride, concern, and something like wonder. "You know, Nathan," she said quietly, "when they write the history of how America's nuclear command systems were saved from compromise, they'll never believe it started with a farmer who couldn't drive past a car caught in a flood." Nathan smiled. Despite his exhaustion, the best stories never look remarkable at the beginning. With Rusty at his side and allies surrounding him, Nathan Foster stepped forward into the next chapter of an extraordinary journey that had begun with the simplest of human instincts, the unquestioning decision to help someone in desperate need, regardless of the cost.